is Lizzie Jelski, and the topic I have for my presentation is point of view. So let's get started. So firstly, what is point of view? Point of view is the outlook or position in which a story is told in, and how much that person, aka the narrator or the author, knows. Each type of point of view represents different characteristics and styles that strengthen either their writing or their speech. So point of view is very important when understanding novels and films because the way in which a story is told is the way the reader or the listener feels, which can really make or break a story because obviously nobody wants to watch or read a book that doesn't have some type of emotion or urgency in it. It also guides the reader in ways of interpreting the events happening, which helps in a lot of different ways, which we'll see when I explain each type of point of view. It also builds eagerness and suspense, which I said before, and some types of point of view do this better than others. And lastly, it depicts the narrator or the author's tone for the story, which can give readers or listeners a better understanding of what it's going to be like to read or watch the film or book, which was really going to tell you from the beginning whether it's worth your time or not. So, what are the types of point of view? The ones that I'm going to be discussing are first person, second person, third person omniscient, and third person limited. So, first we have first person point of view. So in the first person narration in a book or film, the person is telling the story from their own perspective, commonly using the word I. And when I say the person, I'm either talking about the narrator or the author. The emotions and feelings towards certain things are depicted by that character, and the readers or listeners get a better understanding of what they stand for and what the premise of the story is going to be. So, an example I have of first person point of view is from the book In 5 Years. And the quote that I have here says, "The elevator door opens to the 33rd floor, and I suck in my breath. I can feel the energy like candy to the vein, and I look around at the people moving in and out of the glass-doored conference rooms like extras on the show Suits." This quote is based on the story in which the girl, who is the main character, she's explaining her own life. She imagines her life in 5 years from now, and by using the first person, readers like us can understand her deeper feelings about life and where she's at in the moment and can really feel for her when she thinks of certain things that could happen in the future. And it also gives us a better understanding throughout the story of what's going on and the place that she's currently at in her mind. So, second person point of view. What is it? In second person narration in a book or film is where the reader or listener, aka you, is engaged into the character of the story. In this case, the narrator explains what you do in the situation. So basically, you are the character. The reader or the listener in second person point of view can feel more engaged as it's turned into something about themselves, further growing a larger audience from amusement. Because usually when things are about ourselves, we're more amused and engaged into that type of reading or film. It can also challenge the reader or listener to think of some uncomfortable settings in which they have to experience or think about in their own shoes, because usually in these books or films, there's a lot of tricky situations that you have to figure out how to get through, and so since you are the character, you think about all of these things a lot more intensely. So, an example I have is from the book The Night Circus, and the quote says, "You are amongst them, of course. Your curiosity got the better of you, as curiosity is wont to do. You stand in the fading light, the scarf around your neck pulled up against the chilly evening breeze, waiting to see for yourself exactly what kind of circus only opens once the sun sets." So this provides readers to actually feel tension and wonder about the experience that they're about to have for themselves. And it also makes you question what's going to happen next. Also, by using the imagery words like the scarf around your neck pulled up against you, um, makes you kind of feel these things yourself since you are the character. And so it gets you deeper and deeper into this book. So the next one we have is third person omniscient. Um, so third person narration in books and films is when the narrator isn't involved within the events in the story. So common terms that they're going to be using are they, she, and him. So third person is important because it offers the reader or listener's depth and perception about the story in different lengths or ways, which also gives details from multiple characters' perspectives. So, third person has several types of its own, and one is omniscient. So, third person omniscient in books and films is when the narrator knows and says every character's thoughts or feelings. So, they know the background story, they know how they're feeling, what's happening next, all of that. So, omniscient is important as it gives the author more room to work with by being able to be inside the heads of every character, which includes more details and description for us. It also gives the reader a better understanding of the overall story because we're getting a lot of different sides and point of views at one time. It also allows for there to be connections between characters, which makes the story flow and become more interesting because let's say there's a love interest and you get to see both sides of the story, you can really feel a deeper connection for them. For this one, I'm going to be giving an example later on. So another type of third person point of view is third person limited. So third person limited is still the same as third person. However, it's different than omniscient because the narrator doesn't know or say the thoughts or feelings of the characters. And one character is usually the central point of the story. This means that the reader or listener learns more about the character as time goes on throughout the book or the film. So, this is also an interesting tactic for a narrator to use in a book or a film, as limited allows readers to become deeply connected to one character and fully understand their thoughts and feelings, which allows us to almost feel the same emotions as them because we're learning so much about them as time goes on. It feels like we're like one. And it's also a way for the narrator to build suspense throughout the story to keep the audience interested, which is something I said before about building urgency. It's really important to keep readers engaged and on the edge of the seat. When this happens, usually you either can't put the book down or we're so interested in the movie that we get lost in time. And I'll have an example of this in the next slide as well. So, when connecting point of view with our current course text that we have read and watched, I obviously picked The Namesake because so far in the semester, this is the only book that we have had available to read and watch. So, in the book, Lahiri, which is the author, uses third person omniscient. And an example from the book I have is when she says, "For by now he's come to hate questions pertaining to his name, hate having to constantly explain. He hates having to tell people that it doesn't mean anything in Indian. He hates having to wear a name tag on his sweater." So this was an important aspect to put in the book, like a good use of omniscient point of view, because it allowed us as readers to understand the world of multiple characters at once. As I know in this quote, we're only understanding like the background of Goggle, but we also understand Ashima's and Ashok's background as well during this, and it shows both of their different kinds of alienation or disconnection that they feel living or for Goggle growing up in America. It also allowed us to see them grow as characters, not only by themselves but together. There's a lot of times in the beginning where they kind of butt heads, but at the end, Ashima and Goggle become very close and dependent on each other. The quote I used in particular shows the deeper feelings of Goggle, and by the text using third person on descent, we also get to see why Goggle's dad chose this name and why it was important to him, which gives us both sides of the story, which is a good thing because we get to understand how Goggle hates his name, but then at the same time, we feel for him and want him to keep his name because of the background story that his dad had with the train crash and everything. So then in the film of the namesake, it uses third person limited. And an example I have is from the minute mark 2:29:31 to 30 minutes. And basically, the scene is Ashima looking at the note that Goggle brought home. And the note says, due to your son's preferences, he'll be known as Goggle in school. So, using third person limited was a good choice for the movie, but because it narrowed the film down to just Goggle's perspective, and in this way, we got to see his emotional struggle and understood like why he has these feelings of alienation and like what's going on in his life way more deeply. It also highlighted the disconnection he feels from his culture and family because we don't really get to see Ashima or Shok's point of view at all. So by using limited, we also feel that disconnection that Goggle felt, which makes us understand his feelings of alienation a lot more than we could in the book as it was using omniscient. It also creates more self discovery while watching since we don't get the full background of what's going on from his parents' point of view, and which is like very, creates a lot of urgency throughout. And using limited is more common in films rather than books because the narrator can condense it much quicker in terms of time's sake, which is important because obviously in a book you can make it as long as you want, but in a movie it's usually only about 2 hours long. So things have to be narrowed down to one character, which is why I think they chose to do third person limited in the film rather than in the book. And then these are just my works cited pages, all the books I used to explain examples, and then websites that helped me figure out the differences between point of view. I hope you enjoyed and have a great rest of your day.